Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Apartment Investor Mastery, Norado Real Estate, and Producers Wealth.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Hey, welcome to GRE, from California's 405 freeway to I-95 in Newark, New Jersey, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and this is Get Rich Education. We're talking to a Get Rich Education listener like you today, and you're going to find out that this guest has more strength and resilience than almost anybody after what he's gone through. Now, when you think about it, failure is the most natural way of learning in the world. But sometimes when you suffer an especially painful failure, and it was a totally optional activity in your life, an unnecessary one, like perhaps your life-altering motorcycle wreck or you nearly drowning in a whitewater rafting accident, well, that can affect you like an indelible scar in your life for the rest of your life, and you might never again try anything like riding a motorcycle or going rafting ever again. Well, what if your real estate investments failed and you had atypical loan types where the bank was able to call all your loans to be paid in full and you couldn't afford to pay them, and then you got taken to the cleaners because you had to declare personal bankruptcy when you couldn't pay the bank? Financial rock bottom. Would you ever invest in real estate again after that? And if you did, would you ever use substantial debt for real estate again? Well, today's guest did have to declare personal bankruptcy because of real estate debt that got out of control. And as a result, he thought that real estate was dangerous and bad, and that real estate debt is especially bad. His goal was to get completely debt-free by age 40. Well, once his bankruptcy ordeal had long blown over, he discovered Get Rich Education a few years ago, and to stick with an analogy, after his bankruptcy, which we'll call his awful motorcycle accident, he kept an open mind. He learned, he fought his self-doubt. He was intrepid enough to find the inner confidence to counter social convention, jump on that motorcycle again, and ride faster than he ever rode before. Let's meet today's remarkable guest. Well, today we have a Get Rich Education listener, much like you on the show. He has a wife and 2 children. He lives in Columbiaville, Michigan, which is a tiny place between Flint and Detroit. He owns an insurance franchise there. He likes to travel, spend time with his family, and play basketball. Welcome to Get Rich Education listener, Dustin Jones.
Thanks, Keith. Glad to be here.
Hey, it's so good to have you on. So tell us about where it all began for you. What, about 15 years ago, Dustin?
For me, my real estate journey started in 2003. I bought my first rental property in Flint, Michigan. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house with a basement. After repairs, I had about $27,000 into it total, and it rented for about $600 a month and produced about $200 a month in cash flow after I had it refinanced.
Wow, and that's amazing to begin with. So that right there is more than a 2% rent to value ratio, renting for $600, and after repairs, you've got about $27K into it.
Yep. Over there at that time, that's about what the houses would go for.
Yeah, astounding for a lot of us.
Yep, it's a lot different than today's market for sure. At that point, I had never heard of the BRRRR strategy, but that's essentially what I did. I bought it, renovated it, rented it, and then refinanced it. And I just kind of recycled the same money to buy some more houses.
Yeah.
By 2005, I had 7 houses. And then a friend and I decided to kind of scale the operation. And so we partnered up and we started purchasing homes together. And our goal was to get 100 houses. That was what we were shooting for.
Okay, and this is right around the time the housing market's reaching a crescendo here, 2005, 2006.
Yes. Yep. Our timing was not ideal, and our market selection was not ideal either, but that's the way it worked out. So after we had about 15 houses, we refinanced those houses onto a commercial loan. We tied all the properties together onto one note, and we did that 3 times, basically. We ended up with about 55 units by 2007.
Great.
And we had just the 3 commercial notes. We did have a couple of other loans in there. Not every single property was tied up onto these loans, but most every one of them was. And we had 2 banks that we used, and we had over $1 million in real estate debt, and it all happened really fast. The loans were all in the name of an LLC, but we of course we had to personally guarantee those notes.
Yeah.
2007 and 2008 were a really tough time for Flint. There were a lot of auto-related manufacturing jobs that were lost during that time. And so the market changed really fast. The values of properties just fell very quickly. So the appraised value on the houses we were buying after we had fixed them up were usually in the $30,000 range, maybe a little more, a little less. But after Flint went through 7 and 8, a lot of those houses, the appraised value was less than $10,000.
Gosh.
Yeah. And really, if you wanted to sell one for $10,000, you'd have to find the right buyer for sure.
Yeah, that's astounding. And for those that are uninitiated, Flint, Michigan is very closely tied to the automotive industry. That business sector itself went through some really difficult times around 2007, 2008, around 10 years ago. And this is also within the greater housing crisis, Great Recession, and mortgage meltdown that affected most all industries in the United States. So we're really talking about a double whammy here. We're talking about both a market problem and a larger systemic banking and real estate problem.
Exactly. And when we were going through it here, we didn't even realize that it wasn't this bad around the rest of the country. But it was, looking back, it was a lot worse here than I think it was in other parts of the nation.
Okay, so you were probably underwater on these properties.
Yes, by a long shot, definitely. So when the banks, when they would look at a commercial package of loans, 15 houses, for instance, they would look at the total value, and then they would loan us back 70% or maybe 75% of what they thought the equity was in the properties. So obviously we went from, the properties dropped by 2/3 or more in value.
Yeah.
So one day we get a letter from one of the banks explaining to us that they no longer had enough equity in our properties to protect their interest. So they wanted their money back. And they called the note, and they gave us 60 days to pay them back, right around $300,000. And we didn't have the $300,000 to pay them.
Yeah.
So we tried to work out some different things with them, and we just could not come up with anything that was reasonable to them. And so they foreclosed, and we had to end up filing a bankruptcy on the LLC.
Yeah, gosh, I imagine when you first get a letter in the mail like that, the first time you read through it, you're thinking, oh, well, this couldn't really say what I think it says, but yet that's what it says, and what's that really mean? And yeah, your heart probably sank once it all sunk into your mind.
Yeah, definitely. And when we got the letter, we kind of just thought, they want to start a dialogue about something. And so we took the letter into the bank, and we tried to negotiate, and we tried to make some kind of concession or just try to make another deal with them. And they just basically just said, nope, just pay us our money and we'll move on. We couldn't.
Yeah, that's rough. So you filed bankruptcy on the LLC.
Yep, we filed bankruptcy on the LLC. And then shortly after that, the second bank called the other 2 notes basically for the same reason. And we had a similar dialogue with them. They just said, nope, just pay us our money and we'll move on. And we couldn't do that either. So we ended up having to file bankruptcy on those 2 LLCs as well. So basically the banks took the properties back. They sold them all in a fire sale. And then for me, my kind of bankruptcy finale was they sued me personally for all of the debt. And so I had to file an individual bankruptcy. Coincidentally, right around the same time General Motors filed their bankruptcy.
Huh.
Yeah, so we both filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy right around the same time in 2009.
Yeah, that really must have felt like rock bottom for you. Well, for some of you out there listening, wondering, well, what's all this about calling notes due when there's a market under duress? Well, Dustin had these rolled into a commercial loan. Okay, look, performing residential agency loans, meaning like 30-year fixed, Fannie Freddie loans that are performing, meaning that you as a borrower are making timely payments and doing everything in accordance with the agreement, you're going to be fine, okay? Unless you sell the property, well, then your loan balance is due in full if you sell the property. But of course, you have the proceeds from the sale right there to pay it off. Now, if a borrower misbehaves and they don't make mortgage payments or they keep missing tax payments, now that might trigger a clause for you that the mortgage payment is due in a residential loan. Or maybe you have some other fault or fraud on your end might be constituted. Say you get a primary residence loan, but then you never really moved in to the residence, but yet you qualified for the advantageous primary residence loan. So, as long as you're doing things in accordance with the mortgage agreement, you ought to be fine. Now, sometimes banks call this process acceleration or acceleration on demand. It's kind of other terminology for the note being called due in full. So that means the balance of the loan becomes due immediately, and this only occurs in rare or extreme cases. Generally, a mortgage acceleration happens because of something adverse that the borrower has done. Just remember, very few mortgage loans contain a clause allowing for acceleration of the loan, and generally the lender cannot just decide to call in a loan at random, okay? A borrower likely would break a mortgage agreement that would give a lender a power like that, and this type of acceleration is more common in a commercial loan like Dustin had, and it took place in the worst economic downturn this nation's had in 7 decades, and it was in an area of automobile industry decline. So mortgages are written completely differently now than they were in the Great Depression, but this confluence of adverse circumstances has got Dustin declaring personal bankruptcy.
Yep, and through all of that, I decided that real estate was a bad investment, and I really didn't want anything more to do with it. My parents always told me when I was growing up that to learn from my mistakes and learn from the mistakes of others. And for a long time, I thought real estate was my mistake. I thought the purchase of the real estate was my mistake.
Yeah, it's easy to feel that way then.
Yep, it was. And so it wasn't until years later, really, thanks to you, that I realized that real estate wasn't the actual mistake. I mean, I did make lots of mistakes through the process, including the market I chose, the timing of when we were buying, and also really not understanding the terms of the loan that I signed. But I did realize that real estate wasn't my mistake in the end.
Yeah, but what you did is how a lot of people approach real estate. They just look at property in their own local market, and to them, that's real estate investing. The option is either invest in my local market or not. And yeah, most people just don't understand the risk of only being in one market.
Yep. At that time, I don't even know if there was turnkey, but it never occurred to me that you could have real estate outside of a driving radius of your house.
Right.
So after the collapse, I focused on increasing my income, paying down the debt on my home, my personal mortgage. I just really wanted nothing to do with debt at that point. I just didn't want payments. I wanted to be debt free by 40 was the mantra. I just stuck that in my head. I'm going to be debt free by 40.
Debt free by 40.
That was what I was shooting for. I don't agree with everything Dave Ramsey says. I liked his concept about being debt free. And so I was listening to him on the radio. That's just kind of what I bought into, debt free by 40. That was my goal.
Okay. It's very easy to say debt free. That sounds compelling to someone, but just like they say with a lot of answers in life, one way is simple but wrong, and the other is complex but right. And I don't think doing things the way we do them is overly complex, but that is sort of the overarching mantra on something like, the desire to be debt-free.
Yeah, my mindset's completely changed at this point. But in 2015, I found GRE, and at first I seriously laughed at your message. Keith, I thought you were crazy for telling people to go into debt to buy rentals. I never had a conversation with anybody else about it, but just sitting in my car listening to you, I was like, man, this guy does not know what he's talking about. He is crazy.
So you were almost listening to it for entertainment, just to get a chuckle out of it, more so than any, education or abundance mindset or anything else.
Yeah, I was. At first, that's definitely what I kept listening. I love the positivity. You always talked about the positive side of everything, and I liked the phrases that you had. But at that time, I bought into Dave Ramsey. I just believed that debt was dumb and cash was king, and that's what Dave always says. I just thought that that's the route my life was going in. But I did keep listening because of your positive message. really the one thing that got me to, I don't remember if it was the first time or maybe the second time I listened, or maybe I checked out the website, but your phrase, the scarcity mentality is abundant and the abundance mentality is scarce.
Yeah.
That hit home with me. I like that one.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, the space that you're occupying now, because you have these, I guess, more conventional debt-free notions that have become sort of embedded inside you after the experience that you've gone through. And I'm talking more about financial freedom and how debt freedom often prevents one from being financially free. It's sort of like the rich dad mantra of seeing both sides of the coin. When you can see both the debt-free side and the financially free side of the coin, and you get to stand at the edge of the coin, then you can see both sides at the same time and decide what's best for yourself.
At that time, like I said, I was listening to Dave Ramsey and I was listening to you. Basically, I was listening to your new episodes as they came out, and then I was kind of working my way back through the old episodes. I had a battle going on in my head between eating beans and rice with Dave Ramsey or your and your abundance mentality. I mean, that's really the battle that was going on. It was debt-free versus financially free. That was just it was new to me. That's kind of what I was dealing with.
Well, you can imagine what's going on inside the head of Dustin Jones, Get Rich Education listener from Michigan around this time. We're going to come back with more and find out what Dustin decided to do. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Dustin Jones. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
For an income property investor like you that needs an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group. And over the years, you've heard owner Chaley Ridge generously give her time to you right here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in almost every U.S. state, and you're going to find out how they've helped more Americans realize their dreams of financial freedom through real estate than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com. MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president of Producers Wealth. Producers Wealth assists people in creating, protecting, and perpetually multiplying wealth in any economy through creating processes that help them increase their production, provide them with liquidity, passive income generators, and opportunities for enormous growth. Learn more about their time-tested and proven systems at yourownbankingsystem.com.
This is Paradigm Life's Patrick Donahoe. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're having a conversation that I think you can probably relate to. We're talking with Get Rich Education listener Dustin Jones, and he kind of has this debt-free imprint sort of inside his mind. And, he's learning more about being financially free, and he's kind of teeter-tottering back and forth on which might really be best for him and his future. Okay, so you started listening to Get Rich Education in 2015, and it's got you thinking somewhat differently, or at least you've got some notions in your head that are sort of going against each other and going against conventional wisdom. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I moved along the lines of the phrases that you say. I went from the scarcity mentality is abundant to the abundance mentality is scarce. So that kept me listening at first. Then it was your talk about time freedom and return on time invested.
Yeah.
Those concepts were things that I just never even thought about before. I mean, those really helped me kind of change my mindset. But finally, it was financially free beats debt free. And when I would try to fight with you on that, while you were saying things and I'm yelling back at you, I couldn't really come up with anything that made sense. I couldn't come up with anything to rebut what you were saying. That phrase really caused me to change the way I viewed money and investing and really the way I thought about the rest of my life, honestly.
One can be conventional or one can be wealthy.
Yeah, exactly. That's another one for sure. So after episode 6, it was sort of the point where I decided I either needed to stop listening to you or I needed to take some action and kind of restart the process.
That's great. It's astounding how many people point to episode 6 of Get Rich Education, released in late 2014, as the most life-altering podcast episode they've ever heard. And it sounds like you're telling me it was pivotal to you as well.
Definitely, it resonated with me. And I seriously had that thought, you know what, I either need to do what Keith is saying or I need to just move on to something else. So I kept listening and took some action.
Yeah, and just for those that don't know, episode 6 was basically why financially free beats debt-free, justified so many ways and so many layers.
In the fall of 2017, I refinanced my primary residence into a 30-year mortgage from a 15-year, and I pulled about $200,000 in equity out of the house.
And wait, you're the guy that wanted to be debt-free. What happened? You pulled equity out of your house?
Right, and it was the year I turned 40, actually, too. So it was the year that I was supposed to be closing in on my other goal. I just completely changed directions and went completely the other way, Keith.
Yeah, because I think one learns is, when equity is removed from a home, sure, there is some risk that way, but the return from equity is always zero. And once equity is removed from a home, if it's placed as down payment seeds into other properties, no equity was lost. Equity was merely transferred.
Exactly. The talk that you gave or you've given more than once about the fact that the worst investment you can possibly make is in your home equity, that's another one that just I couldn't argue with it. I've got this equity sitting here and I'm not doing anything with it. I might as well be using it to generate some passive income for myself and my family.
That's right. Home equity is unsafe, illiquid, and its rate of return is always zero.
Exactly. So, I took that equity that I had in the house, and at this point I have 5 turnkey rentals.
Great.
I'm in Montgomery, Alabama, Houston, Texas, and Memphis, Tennessee. And I have a plan to have 10 by the end of the year. And I currently have $781,000 in real estate debt on my way to probably 1.1 or 1.2 by the end of the year.
Now, isn't this so societally counterintuitive? A lot of people would talk about how they have a net worth of $781K now, and they want their net worth to be $1.1 to $1.2 million by the end of the year. Dustin is telling you that he wants to have that much real estate debt during those time frames. Is that counterintuitive or what?
It's counterintuitive for sure, but it's definitely a mindset that I'm in now. And it's funny how that really does change. My view of the debt just means, more debt means more passive income. That's the direction I'm headed.
Sure, and that means more mortgages and cash flow control mortgages. So tell us about the cash flow from the 5 turnkey rentals that you bought so far on your way to a total of 10 by the end of this year. Tell us about the cash flow.
So right now with the 5 houses, the cash flow is about $1,250 per month after I make an allowance for vacancy and maintenance. And so I'm hoping to double that by the end of the year. So $2,500 by the end of the year.
So if you double that by the end of the year to $2,500 in cash flow from total of 10 turnkey properties, how much more is the mortgage debt on your primary residence in you going ahead and taking this money out?
That part of it, for me, wasn't much of a change because I had a 15-year note and I was paying extra on that note.
Okay.
So really, money out of pocket monthly is no different. It's actually less than I was paying in the other one because I was voluntarily paying extra. I didn't look at the numbers to know for sure. I believe it was around $600 a month was the difference between the 30-year and the 15-year, if I remember right.
So now you've increased the leverage ratio on your own home, and you also have a leverage ratio on turnkey properties of probably 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 in these other turnkeys, depending on whether you put 20% down or 25% down.
Yep.
So if a person thinks that real estate is going to appreciate over the long term, would you want to own more properties or fewer properties? Do you think real estate is going to be worth more 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 30 years from now, or less? I think most everyone would say more. I think Dustin is telling us more with his strategy.
I believe more. I'm really not considering that at all when I'm looking at how these numbers are going to work for me. I'm looking strictly from a cash flow standpoint.
That's a great answer. Cash flows control mortgages.
So any appreciation is just going to be a bonus for me. I'm really not looking for any number as far as appreciation goes. And really, all the appreciation does is gives you more of that home equity, which you can't use unless you refinance anyway. So I'm not even considering that. The tax benefits are nice, and the cash flow is what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. And of course, those loans being paid down by others. Of course, you have an inflation hedging benefit since you have more debt. And yeah, your words about appreciation are right on. Even though you don't have an expectation for appreciation, it's just fairly likely that it's going to happen over time. And of course, one typically has greater wealth from leverage appreciation than they do from cash flow. But yes, in that intermediate term, every month, it's that sustainable cash flow that controls all those mortgages.
I'm investing for the cash flow only. That's my main objective.
All right, so you're expecting to get to 10 turnkey rentals by the end of this year, which would be terrific. What's after that?
I think when I get to 10, I will probably just take a look, reevaluate, and see how it's going and make sure it's working the way that I expect it to work. And then I'll set another goal at that point. But, probably another 10 in 2019 wouldn't be bad. Might be kind of fun. So if I can make that happen and everything's going well with it, I probably would shoot for that.
All right, so we're talking about the real estate investing part of your life. I mean, we are at its heart a real estate investing show. Are there some other things that you invest in?
I do. I've invested in some real estate syndications. I've done a little bit with gas and oil. For me, those I consider kind of all passive activities. For me, what I really like to do, I sell options on stocks and EFTs and commodities to generate income too. I view that as a income generating strategy. I try to just generate a little bit of money as far as ROI each month on the money that I have in those accounts. I treat that as a rental business. I went through what I went through in 07 and 08. I kind of switched over to the generating the income with the options, and I viewed that in the same way I viewed the rentals, just as a passive income. It's actually quite active if you're going to do it well and keep good track of what's going on, but that took me a while to figure out. But lately, I've really enjoyed doing that, and I continue to do that.
And you're talking about sort of the active management on stock brokerage accounts, ETFs, using options, and so on?
Yep, I just basically sell options against stock to generate income, and I'm not looking for any home runs. I'm just looking to generate 2 or 3% a month on each one, and sometimes they go bad, and you just have to manage the risk and try not to lose too much on the ones that you lose on. But they're high probability, and as long as you can manage the risks on the ones that don't make money, overall you can do pretty well.
Yeah, some people look to invest some of their dollars in something more exciting because turnkey real estate investing, although you do typically have 5 profit centers over time and it provides you with cash flow and the great access to leverage at 5-to-1, it's just kind of slow and boring for some people. They want to take some of their money and be in something that moves around a bit more quickly, maybe options on stocks.
Yeah, definitely. It's very boring, especially when you compare it to the stock market or the options market. But it's more steady, takes less time. And I've outsourced all of that. Per your recommendation, I've outsourced all the rental activities. And so I really enjoy doing the options and keeping track of that.
Any sort of last thing our audience might need to know, Dustin, or any particular pitfalls that you ran into with originating loans or purchasing properties or dealing with a property manager on your turnkeys? Just any one thing that a listener might really benefit from that's thinking about making their first turnkey real estate investing purchase?
Yeah, I would say with the turnkeys, make sure you talk to several and be very comfortable with who you're dealing with. Not all turnkey providers are the same. Some are good and some aren't. I personally have had the best luck with the providers who are kind of a one-stop shop. They buy the home, they rehab it, they have in-house property management. Those companies for sure have given me the best ROI and ROTI, return on my time, for sure. The companies that are not true turnkeys, that kind of, they buy a house and then they try to just set up the rest of the process all subcontracted. I've just not had great luck with those companies. Everybody kind of wants to point the finger at someone else. In my experience, nobody really has just took charge and said, yeah, we'll handle this. Everybody says, well, talk to Joe, talk to so-and-so, talk to somebody else. They just want to kind of pass the buck down the line. So for me, the people are by far the most important part. And I've heard lots of people say that. I certainly didn't come up with that, but the people are the most important part. You have to make sure that the turnkey companies are good people and that you can work with them and that you can trust them. The other thing I would say is inspections. And I've heard this before too, but make sure you get a good inspection and make sure that whoever you're buying that home from takes care of all of the issues on the inspection before you close. There was an inspection. Not everything got completely taken care of from the inspection before the closing. They kind of rushed the closing. there were some issues that I had dealing with that.
Yeah, maybe in the inspection, if there's still an outstanding finding, but it's not a health and safety item, there might be dollars escrowed into a fund for you to go ahead and handle that later. But there always seems to be some runaround or inconvenience, or your involvement or time just isn't considered enough in the escrow amount that's put aside for you sometimes.
That's exactly correct. And also there's no urgency. Everybody's kind of already been paid for what they're doing. And in my instance, there was just not a whole lot of urgency.
Yeah. So another takeaway is it sounds like, you're saying there are good turnkey companies and there are not so good turnkey companies. I think turnkey is a very compelling buzzword. Well, that doesn't mean every turnkey company is great to deal with, just like every plumbing company isn't great to deal with. And the other takeaway I think we're getting from you is wait until the property is truly turnkey condition, therefore already being renovated, already tenanted, and already under management.
Correct. If you can get one that's already got a tenant, that's the way to do it.
One sure way to know what your rent amount is going to be and not have to guess at it is have a signed lease with that first month's rent already paid. That's a great way to know what the rent amount is going to be in a property.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing. The pro formas. A lot of times they'll give a pro forma that's just kind of, I won't say wild guess, but it's a guess. But you're right. If you have that signed lease, you don't have to guess. You know exactly what you're getting yourself into.
Nothing's more real than real, and the people are more important than the property. I really thank you for coming onto the show, Dustin. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Keith.
That is probably the most I've ever laughed during an episode when Dustin said he started listening here just to get entertainment value because he found all of this dumb before he understood it. He rose from the ashes like few would. And I think that his real estate investing strategy is now pretty sound. He originally did real estate debt the wrong way. After that, most people wouldn't listen to GRE and apply our principles here. And by the way, I'm not telling Dustin or you to do anything. I'm saying listen, think, and decide. Dustin is a strong guy to give real estate another try, and I think that he's more likely to find success in life than others. He's resilient and he's a truth seeker, and let's give him a ton of credit for getting out of his comfort zone to come on the air here and discuss his failure for your benefit. Didn't you like listening to Dustin? I thought that he was great. Well, if you'd like to let him know yourself or contact Dustin about anything, he was also kind enough to have his email address left in the show notes for your benefit so you can reach out that way. Do you want to know about another option to meet Dustin and me in person? That is on our upcoming Belize Investor Tour, Round 2, and it's going to be September 6th to 9th in idyllic Placencia, Belize. Yes, Dustin will be one of the tour attendees with me there. I just returned here to the U.S. from Belize a week ago, and I can't tell you how great it was to meet so many of you in person on that tour there for round 1, and basically just to go ahead and turn the tables as I became your listener and heard your story in person. Well, if you have serious interest in investing in cash flowing resort property in Belize that you can actually enjoy yourself for a few weeks a year, not a timeshare, and it's in an underdeveloped market with government officials supportive of development, think about how you're diversifying in multiple ways. You're in a foreign market, and it also happens to be close to the U.S. and be English speaking, and you're catering to a higher end resort goer there when you might currently be supplying workforce housing to lower middle class residents elsewhere in your portfolio. That's why it's another way for you to diversify, and there are a lot of other benefits. So what is all this about? Well, to learn more about the opportunity, just start at GetRichEducation.com/Belize. Big thanks to Get Rich Education listener Dustin Jones. I'll be back next week with milestone episode number 200. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
If you want to retire in 5 years or less through real estate investing, then pay close attention as I'm about to share my proven recipe with you. This is Brad Sumrock, and I've taught thousands of people just like you how to replace their incomes, quit their jobs, or simply have more income and freedom than they ever thought possible. And we do this by investing in apartment buildings. After starting with no experience, I managed to pocket over $1 million in cash and retire from my 17-year corporate job after only 3 years of apartment investing. And I have hundreds of successful students that have had similar results. If you want to get out of the rat race or simply have more income and freedom in your life, then investing in apartment buildings might be the answer for you. Visit our website at bradsumrock.com to get more information about our upcoming training events. That's bradsumrock.com.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.